All right, so are you ready to dive in? Today we're going to be focusing on some English phrases that are going to help you out in the workplace in business settings.
Absolutely. And you know these phrases are going to be helpful even if English isn't your first language.
For sure.
And no matter what your job is, these phrases will help you sound more confident and professional, make a good impression, and get things done.
Yeah, exactly. And our source for this deep dive is called Top English Phrases for Work and Business. And it's written like a script for an instructional video.
Okay.
But we're going to be like digging way deeper into these phrases, looking at how they can be used in all sorts of situations.
I love that because sometimes you see those phrases and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. But then you get into like a real conversation at work and you're like, wait, how do I actually use this?
Exactly. It's all about nuance and strategy.
Exactly.
Okay. So the first section in our source is about greetings and starting conversations. And like the first phrase they give is, how's everything going? Which is so classic. Like everyone's heard that a million times. But
Yeah, it's like the go-to, right?
yeah, so how do we actually use that effectively?
Well, it can be as simple as just, good, thanks, how are you? But I think it can be a chance to steer the conversation a little bit, If you want to keep things brief, you can just say, good, thanks, how are you? But if you're actually hoping to, chat a little bit more, you can give like a little more detail and see if the other person wants to do the same.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, that like that seemingly simple phrase can actually set the tone for the whole interaction.
It's all about like sending those signals, right?
Right.
Like, do I want to keep this short? Or do I want to actually connect a little bit?
Oh, that's really smart.
And another phrase that I think is super interesting is, can we touch base later? It's a good one, like a catch-all,
Yeah, I use that one all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, does that sound like I'm just trying to like get rid of this person, like brush them off?
Yeah, I know, right? I think the key is to be genuine and specific, Like, instead of just saying, can we touch base later, you can say something like, I'm swamped right now, but can we circle back tomorrow afternoon?
Right, so you're acknowledging their request, but you're also setting a boundary. You're like
Totally.
setting expectations.
Exactly. And it shows respect for their time and yours, which is important at work when everyone's busy.
For sure. Okay, let's move on to expressing ideas and giving opinions, because I feel like that can get a little bit tricky sometimes.
It can.
Especially if you're trying to be assertive, but you also don't want to like step on anyone's toes.
For sure. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And our source suggests using, in my opinion, to start, but I think there are maybe better ways to frame your opinion, especially in a professional setting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so instead of just saying, like, in my opinion, we should do X, try presenting it as a solution or a suggestion. So, like, instead of saying, in my opinion, we should launch the product in the fall, you could say, I'm wondering if launching in the fall might give us a strategic advantage for the holidays.
Right. So it's like you're not being like, this is what we should do. You're more
it's less
collaborative.
Confrontational.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it encourages dialogue.
Okay. That's really good. So then what about disagreeing? Like,
ooh, that's a tough one.
Because you have to be careful.
It's a minefield.
Yeah.
Huh? It can be.
How do you disagree without being disagreeable?
Right. And the source suggests, I see your point, but, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's so overused. And honestly, it can sound dismissive.
Right.
If you don't use the right tone.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest? I think validating the other person's perspective first is important. So like instead of just jumping in with, I see your point, but say something like, I appreciate your perspective. And I can see why you might feel that way. However, I'm also considering. And then you give your alternative.
Yeah, so you're not like
right.
completely shutting them down. You're like
you're creating that bridge.
Building a bridge.
Yeah.
That's really good. And sometimes you can even disagree by asking a clarifying question.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Right. Like instead of just saying, no, you're wrong, you can say, oh, I'm curious. Can you explain a little more about like why you think that?
Yeah, like help me understand your reasoning.
Yes, exactly.
And it turns that disagreement into a learning opportunity.
Ooh.
Right.
I like that.
It shows that you're actually interested in their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, that's really smart. So we've been talking about like starting conversations, expressing your ideas, and disagreeing respectfully.
Yeah, those are some like foundational skills, right?
Yeah. But there's so much more to cover, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to dive into even more powerful phrases.
Sounds good. It's amazing how much, like, subtle meaning is packed into these phrases, right?
Totally. It's like we're uncovering these like hidden layers of communication
Yeah, for sure.
that we don't even realize we're using.
Exactly. And speaking of uncovering hidden layers, let's talk about asking for clarification.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Our source mentions, could you clarify that for me? And would you mind sending me that report? Which are good starting points,
Right.
but sometimes you need more than just like a basic clarification, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like sometimes I need someone to like really walk me through something.
Exactly. And in those cases, you need to be more specific about what you need.
Okay.
So instead of just saying, could you clarify that for me? You could say, like, I'm having trouble understanding how this new software integrates with our current system. Could you maybe walk me through an example?
Right. So you're giving them
Yeah.
more context so they know exactly.
How to help you.
And it shows that you've put some thought into it too.
Right.
You're not just like, help me, you know?
Yeah.
You're like, I've tried to figure this out on my own, but I'm stuck here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes the best way to get clarity is to just repeat what you think you heard and be like, is that what you meant?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like, so what you're saying is
Yes, exactly.
just to make sure you're on the same page.
Right, to avoid any like miscommunications down the road.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered asking for clarification, but what about when we're the ones offering help?
Okay. Yeah.
Because our source suggests saying, let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.
But sometimes that feels kind of,
I know. It's kind of like a blanket statement.
yeah, it feels generic.
Generic.
Yeah.
I think to make it more genuine, you should be more specific about what you can offer. Okay, so instead of just like, let me know if you need anything, I could be like, hey, I'm free this afternoon if you want an extra set of hands on that project. Or I'm happy to brainstorm some ideas for that presentation if you'd like.
Yeah, exactly. So you're showing that you're actually willing to put in the time and effort.
Right, you're not just offering like empty words.
Yeah, that's more actionable.
Right, and then you become like a valuable resource
Yeah.
to your team.
Totally. And sometimes the best way to offer help is to just see what your colleagues are struggling with and proactively offer a solution.
Oh, I love that. It's like you're anticipating their needs before they even have to ask.
Yeah.
That's so helpful.
It shows initiative
Yeah.
and that you actually want to help the team succeed.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of offering solutions, our source gives us a couple of phrases for that, like, I can help with that, which is like super simple but effective.
Yeah, it's straight to the point.
But I always worry that it sounds too eager, like I'm trying to take over.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like I'm trying to take over their project.
It can be tricky.
So how do you...
I think the key is to say it in a way that acknowledges their ownership of the task.
Okay.
So you could say, I know you're busy with that project. Would it be helpful if I took on some of the research? Or like, I've got some experience with that software. Want me to show you the ropes?
Okay, that makes sense. So it's less about like
Yeah.
taking over and more about like
Yeah, it's more about collaborating.
affording them.
Exactly.
Okay. What about one possible solution could be? I feel like that's a good one for problem solving because
Yeah, I like that.
it's not like dictating the solution. It's more like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you're starting a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Ending it.
Right. And then our source also mentions, let's work together on this, which I love because it just like instantly
Oh, that's a good one.
creates this sense of teamwork.
It's so collaborative.
Yeah. And it's like, we're in this together.
Yeah.
It's not like you do this and I do that. It's like, we're going to tackle this together.
It changes the whole dynamic, right?
Right. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about deadlines because I feel like that's an area where
Ooh, yeah. Deadlines can be tricky.
things can get a little stressful.
Stressful.
Yeah, for sure. So our source starts off with the classic, when is the deadline for this?
Yeah.
Which is like super straightforward.
Yeah. No messing around.
Yeah, it just gets to the point.
Gets the information you need.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you need to be more specific, you can say, I need this by specific time.
Right. So you're setting a clear expectation.
Yes. And I think let's set a deadline for this is a really good one
Oh, I love that one.
for like encouraging collaboration.
Yeah. It gets everyone on board with the timeline.
Right. But sometimes, you know, deadlines are just imposed upon us and we have no say in it.
I know. It's the worst.
So how do you handle a situation where you're given a deadline that you know is just not realistic?
Okay. That's a tough one. I think you have to be diplomatic and focus on the potential risks or challenges. So instead of saying, that's impossible,
Yeah.
try saying something like, I'm worried that this timeline won't allow for proper testing. Could we maybe extend the deadline by a week to make sure we don't compromise quality?
Right, so you're not just complaining, you're offering a solution.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
takes the pressure off.
And it shows that you're thinking critically about the project.
Right. Okay, so now let's move on to the final stage of any workplace interaction, which is closing the conversation.
Okay, yes, very important.
Yeah, because you want to end on a positive note, right?
You want to leave a good impression.
Yeah, exactly. Our source gives us some classics like, thanks for your time, which is always a good one.
It's simple, but it works.
Yeah, and it shows that you respect their time.
Exactly.
And then there's let's touch base again soon, which I like because it suggests that we're going to continue the conversation.
Yeah, it keeps the door open.
But sometimes it feels a bit vague, you know?
I know, it's like, yeah, sure, sometime.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you make it more concrete?
I think you should try to suggest a specific time frame or next step. So
Yeah.
instead of just, let's touch base again soon, you could say, like, I'd like to get your feedback on that proposal after you've had a chance to look it over. Can we schedule a call next week to go over it?
So you're taking that vague intention and you're turning it into like
Yeah,
a concrete plan.
exactly.
I like that. And one of my favorite phrases for closing conversations, especially in writing, is looking forward to hearing from you.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because it's polite, but it also kind of encourages them to respond.
Yeah, it's like a gentle nudge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But are there any situations where that might not be appropriate?
That's a good question. I think you have to be mindful of the power dynamics, you know?
Yeah.
If you're talking to your boss or a client, it might sound a little presumptuous.
Oh, right. Like you're assuming they're just going to drop everything.
Yeah, like you're demanding a response.
Right, right.
So in those cases, maybe a more neutral closing is better. Like, please let me know if you have any questions. Or if you need a specific response, you could say, I'll await your feedback.
Okay, so it's all about being sensitive to the context
Yeah,
and the relationship.
absolutely.
So as we've been going through these phrases, it's clear that like effective communication is about so much more than just the words themselves.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's about your tone, your intention, like the whole package.
It's about building those relationships, fostering collaboration,
Yeah.
and creating a positive and productive work environment.
Right, and being mindful of how our words are going to impact other people.
Exactly. It's not just about getting your point across. It's about doing it in a way that's respectful and helpful.
And that's going to make everyone's lives easier.
Right, for sure.
So we're back, and we've been talking about all these different phrases you can use at work,
Yeah.
you know, to make your life a little easier.
Yeah, to navigate those sometimes tricky conversations.
Exactly.
And to get things done.
Yeah, for sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what stands out to you the most? Like, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
You know, I think it's that even though we've been focusing on specific phrases, it's really about being intentional with your language.
Right, like thinking about the message you want to send.
Exactly. It's like every word you choose, every phrase, it has an impact.
It's like you're crafting a message,
Totally.
and you want to make sure it's the right one.
Right, because communication is so important in the workplace.
And, you know, it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it too, right? Like your tone of voice.
Oh, absolutely. And your body language. And even just like being a good listener.
Right, like we've been given this toolkit of phrases,
Yeah,
but now we have to figure out how to use them.
exactly. And that takes practice.
Yeah,
And just being aware of how you're coming across.
for sure. So what's one thing our listeners can do, like starting today,
That's a good question.
to improve their workplace communication?
I'd say before you speak, take a moment to think about what you want to say
Okay.
and how it might be received by the other person.
So you're not just reacting,
Right.
you're actually thinking about it.
Exactly. And that can help avoid misunderstandings and build stronger relationships.
It's like that saying, think before you speak,
Yeah, exactly.
but for work.
Yeah, for work, for life, for everything.
Right.
Because words have power.
Yeah, they really do. And, you know, it's okay to make mistakes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We all do it,
Learn.
right?
All the time.
The important thing is to learn from them.
Yeah, and be open to feedback.
Yeah, that's really important. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just remember that communication is a skill.
Okay.
And like any skill, it takes practice.
Yeah,
So don't be afraid to try out these phrases, see what works for you, and keep learning.
absolutely. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive into English phrases for work and business. We hope you learned some new tips and tricks to help you communicate more effectively and confidently.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Bye, everyone.